Hi, friend. I'm so glad that you're here for this chat with Ash. You're invited to join me in striving to better know and love God, walk in light of being known and loved by Him, and to make Him known as we share our stories. Some of ours are harder to share than others, but there's hope and beauty in every story because of the author who is doing a great work in and around us every day. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this Chats with Ash. As you have probably caught on if you've been hanging around this season, we have had a lot of guests, and I'm really pumped to introduce two of our good friends, Kenny and Annette, today. They have an amazing story. That's the whole point of this season is we're talking about how when we share our stories, we reveal the author of our stories. And as we've been doing that, we've been talking about how God has different names, and so every guest has chosen a name. But before we get into the heavy stuff, Kenny and Annette, I think our friends online need to get to know you a little bit. So I have a few lightning round questions. Nothing crazy, but let's just do a little get to know you, okay?
Sounds
So,
good.
coffee or tea?
Coffee. It's coffee for both of us.
Oh, good. This is why we're friends. Morning bird or night owl?
I'm definitely a morning bird.
I know.
Ah,
She doesn't get up too easy.
okay. Worst subject in school? Let's just keep it elementary school.
Math for me, never good at math. You were good. You good at everything? She's good at
I'm
everything.
pretty sure she was good at everything.
Yeah. Straight A student.
All right, so this one's a two-part. Mexican or not Mexican food?
Oh, Mexican.
Definitely Mexican.
Okay, now here's the controversial part. Cilantro or no?
Yes.
No, I don't like it.
See, it's the same for Eric and I love it, and he hates it. Last question. How would you define your relationship in one word? Again, I'm putting you on the spot.
Friends.
That's a good one.
Yeah. All right, so when I sent you, Kenny, the list of names, you and Annette were able to talk, and you came back with Jehovah Shammah, which is my personal favorite this season. So I'm excited to hear your story and how you've experienced God as a presence in your life and in your story.
Yeah, I think we were. Yeah, we were putting a lot of thought to it as to what, because I mean, I think God has presented Himself in so many different ways throughout this process. I mean, Annette got her headache in August of 2012. She could tell you the exact date. We thought it was a um, like a sinus headache at first, but it's not gone away, and it got worse for a while. Annette was she had sinus surgery that made it worse because what we figured out was that she has like really like a like her nerves are like super sensitive, and so like in the sinus surgery they like scrape your sinuses and stuff, and so that made it exponentially worse. And then she had neck issues, and so she went to a chiropractor, and they kind of like cracked on her neck and stretched out her jaw and stuff, right? And then that made it worse, and to the point where like probably 2013, 2014, she was just all the time in a dark room by herself uh, with these amped up migraines. So she's basically, um, it was, she was like that probably for at least a year or so, where it was like she spent literally all day long in the bedroom with these blackout curtains in the dark because every little bit of light would make it worse. She'd need help to get to the bathroom, and I would cook dinner, bring her dinner, and she'd eat it in there. And But yeah, I mean, it just kind of got worse there for about a year, and then probably around sometime in 2015, maybe somewhere around there, it started making a little bit more of an improvement where she still obviously has the headaches and the pain and everything like that.
2014, we went to the Mayo Clinic and we weren't able to find a lot of resources there, but we were able to make enough headway that I was able to get up a little bit, eat separate kitchen tables and things like that.
Mm.
In 2015, they were able to find some medication that seemed to help better than some of the ones that I tried. And that's really when we saw things kind of start to move forward.
Right. Before we
So,
go into the forward, can we go a little bit into life before the headache? Did you have any issues with chronic headache or migraines, or was this out of the blue?
no, I'd had headaches since childhood.
Mm.
Uh, but they'd always been manageable. I never had to take prescription drugs or anything for them. I pretty much knew what caused them, and when I was going to get them and how to kind of treat them as best I could. Um, but I was able to work and function, completely, drive a car, watch television, play on the computer, do all the things that I don't do now.
Mm.
So it wasn't really out of the blue when it hit. It was just out of the blue when it stayed. Like I said, I thought it was a kind of a sinus headache at first, which I had dealt with in the past. And so we're like, oh, great, got a sinus infection, no biggie. But then it didn't go away.
Mm.
And that's kind of when we got the clue that this is bigger. Um, and the progressive nature of it, where it would just start to impede, one thing and then another and then another.
Mm-hmm.
And the doctor seemed more and more and more confused.
Yeah, just this kept getting worse and didn't go away. It's almost absurd that people get headaches all the time, and you just kind of assume you get a headache or you get some kind of pain or whatever, that there will come a point in time whenever you don't have a headache.
Mm.
But it's been 24/7 since 2012, so we're coming up on 10 years, I guess,
Yeah.
of her having a constant headache or in neck and shoulder pain and things like that, like fibromyalgia pain that goes along with it.
Mm-hmm. So for clarification, you say it's constant, like you have not had any relief. A day without a headache since 2012.
No,
Okay.
I have the pain is present, but it varies in intensity and in like type. So some days I'm much more functional than others, and then some days, even now, I'm still bedridden. The last few weeks have been pretty rough. Sometimes I just try to do more than I should, or I think I can do more than I really can. I'm kind of stubborn that way. I pay for it. Tried to go to Jake's track meet last weekend. That was a horrible idea.
Mm-hmm.
It was.
Terrible. We learned that.
She got a worse headache, and I lost an entire Saturday.
Oh, wow.
We really had a concept of what track meets were.
It was an all-day thing. Even like a year or so ago, like for her to just sit here and talk, and to be able to listen to your voice on our computer wouldn't have happened. And so we're grateful that she's been able to watch some television and things as probably within the last year or so. We started watching, she was able to watch television and catch shows, and she kind of will sit there with her eyes closed and then like glance at the television for for a couple of seconds, and then it's kind of like radio theater, and she closes her eyes and listens to it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But even a year or so ago, like she wasn't able to do that, so
Right.
that's been good.
I remember at one point talking to my sister. She had come back after her son was born for Thanksgiving. And I hugged her and I said, do you realize it's been 4 years since I've heard the sound of your voice?
Mm.
Just because I wasn't able to be on a phone or communicate in that way at all. So
Right. It's been really isolating for you. When this started, we lived in the same area, and then our family eventually moved to Michigan. And that's been, I guess, part of the challenge. I will say, Annette, though, and I will try not to get emotional on you here when I say this, but I cannot express to you how much it has meant. You have been the one constant friend from Illinois all these years. And that's always spoke so loudly to me because you were, I grew up moving a lot. And so there have been many friends with short seasons, here and there. Distance is just hard. And you're the friend with the best excuse to kind of let that season of friendship go or put it down. And yet you have stayed the course, and your friendship has just meant a lot to me because I know a little bit of what it cost you to like write letters and keep that communication going.
That's because your friendship means so much to me.
Um, when this started, your son was pretty young. I'm trying to remember, were our boys in preschool at the
Yeah,
time?
they were still 3.
Yeah. Oh, gosh, this seems like a lifetime ago.
It was the August of 2012, so they didn't turn 4 till October, November.
Yeah. So life just abruptly changed pretty much overnight for you both. And I want to talk about that season just of change for your family. And how did you navigate that? And were you, this is a question that I'm getting a lot from different people as they are listening to different stories. People are asking, as you walk with God, do you ever feel angry with God? And is that okay to feel that? And I want to ask you guys that because you went through a lot.
You want to answer that?
There were definitely moments. It it changed everything, truly, about our life. It changed everything about the mom that I thought I would be, the wife that I thought I would be. Um, I remember, sorry, um, I remember the day Jake had his kindergarten field trip. And I remember thinking, I have been on so many field trips. Before that, I was a school teacher. And I'm like, I've been on dozens of field trips and I can't go on my son's. And to this day, I never was able to go on one of his field trips. And so sometimes there were things that I missed that to me were just really, really frustrating.
Mm.
And those would be the times that I would kind of feel that little bit of anger
Mm.
set in. But it didn't last long. Um, I think just watching God take care of us and be with us through this process kind of show us that he was in control and this is where he chose for us to be. And I didn't really I didn't really have a right to be angry, I guess, with him over that in that sense. Like I could feel frustrated and sad, but he had a plan that I couldn't see the end of.
Mm.
And knowing that, I guess, just kind of took the anger away.
Yeah, I feel like for me, most certainly, that is almost it's almost my default. I think when things get tough, um, is just so yeah. I mean, Annette is much um, stronger, I think, in that aspect than I am. In that my go-to sometimes just to get angry about it, and there's been so many times that I've just been directly angry with the Lord just because obviously he's the one that would have the power to change it if he so willed. Um, so most of the time I feel stupid for, afterwards for kind of feeling that way, I think. Um, but in answer to your other question, I think it is okay. I think God's shoulders are big enough to deal with my being angry at him. It's so different than Jake's angry at us all the time, but we still adore Jake.
Mm.
Um, he can be mad at us, and in the fact that there's been so many times through him that I've seen him act a certain way, and it reminds me that like, oh, I'm kind of kind of doing that to the Lord, and so. Um, I mean, honestly, it sucks to see somebody that you love like be in constant pain. It sucks that, especially when she first got sick, like I hated and I absolutely resented doing everything by myself. Like it was me and Jake all the time because she was home. So like I would get done working, go buy, go do grocery, buy the groceries. And, even more so than that, we would go to like 4th of July or something like that and watch fireworks. But she can't watch fireworks because of her headaches or something like that. So I feel like I was doing everything by myself. I was married, but we were going and we were doing, I was doing everything by myself. And that made me mad
Mhm.
because that's not what we want. So,
Right.
and I still get that way sometimes. There's still like when she had a flare up, what, 2 weeks ago. We just left church and it just flared up for no reason. And that really, just that, like, sometimes where it just flares up for no reason. Like you can't put a finger on what it was. It wasn't a smell. It wasn't this. It just goes nuts. And then she's like wrecked for like 3 days straight until it kind of settles down to baseline again. That, I don't know why, just that not being able to know what caused it and so we can avoid it makes me so mad.
Mhm. Yeah. There have been several stories in this season with different people, and it's like they've seen a conclusion of sorts, right? So life is just something that we're living. We're in the story here on earth, and we won't see the end of it till we're in heaven. But sometimes we get like the closing of a chapter, right? And the thing about your story, as I've been thinking about talking to both of you, is you're still very much in the thick of this. So you have prayers. You've talked about having a bucket list of things that you hope to do someday, if and when God heals her, but you're still in it. And so, your faith and trust, continued trust in God through this, is something that I really want to talk about because it's hard. It's easier to trust God when we know, like, all right, this is taken care of, it's in a pretty package, God and I are good. But when He doesn't answer our prayers in the way we want, that's a tough road to navigate.
Yeah, I think it definitely is for sure. And that's kind of why, we started thinking about, the names of God. When you would kind of give us that list, think about the names of God, what really came to mind was because we haven't seen a conclusion to it. Like we haven't got the desire of our heart, which would be for the headache to go away and for her to be able to um, live the more regular life. Um, but like throughout the whole experience, there have been so many times when God did enough to where it was clear that He was communicating that He was still there. Um, I think I shared, and Annette and I were talking about this a little bit earlier, and I think I shared this with you via text. But it just reminds me of that time that I was going with, Jake and I were driving. It was back when she was, unable to um, leave the house or even the bedroom. And Jake and I were driving, I think it's my uncle's house. We drove past Copeland Park. It was pitch black. There's no lights out there or anything like that. And Jake he was probably 3 or 4 maybe. And he's always been kind of like any kid, kind of just scared of the dark. And I've always been the type to just kind of tease him. But we drove past the park, and as we were driving past that park, I said, "Hey, Jake, let's go out there and go for a walk in the middle of in the middle of the park." And it's like there's like no lights in it. And I kind of thought for sure he was going to be like, "No way." But I guess maybe his answer kind of surprised me a little bit. He said, "Okay." And I was like, "Are you sure? It's really dark, Jake." And he said, "Yeah, I'm sure." And I was like, "Well, why?" And he said, "Well, because you'd be there." And I don't know why that's kind of stuck with me as being so sort of profound, but like, um, you can do a lot of things. You can go through some of the darkest stuff if you've got your father there with you, if he's with you or he's there. And Jake was completely willing to go, walk in the middle of this dark, creepy looking park, simply because I was going to be there with him. Um, and so, throughout this, we've seen, um, I don't know if we've ever shared this with you particularly. If not, we probably should have at some point in time, or at some point in time. But like I kind of alluded to on the text, that you guys had meant a lot to us. We, obviously you guys were living back home, but there was a point in time whenever Annette was, um, she was not getting up. She was I was helping with the bathroom and, bringing dinner and stuff like that. And I was trying to work and Jake was like, was it summertime or something? Like he was here. So it's like I was trying to keep a 3-year-old occupied so that he doesn't bother her, and work.
Like 2 mornings a week.
Yeah, that's what it was. Work and things. And honestly, I had just gotten to the point. I don't know if I've told a whole lot of people this, but I got what?
Did the video church.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I did do a video church. But, I got to the point where I was like, I don't know what to do. I have to work. I have to make money. I have to somehow take care of this kid. I have to, take care of my wife. And just everybody needed me. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I bawling like a baby and praying. And my prayer was, I guess you could say, it's pretty angry at God. I was just like, yeah, I don't know what to do. If you want me to go through this, you want us to go through this, then you're going to have to take it. You're just going to have to do it. And I'll bet it was probably 25 minutes you had called on the phone. And you said, Eric and I want to take care of Jake on the days when he wasn't at preschool. And that took a huge load off of us when you guys were willing to do that. And it was just God kind of saying, this is still going on, but I'm here. It's not like we made that up. We didn't like say, hey, we need somebody to take care of Jake. It was a need that we hadn't expressed. And it had just happened so quickly that, it was literally within a half an hour. I think I left the bathroom, came back upstairs and started to work again. And then I got a phone call. So, just things like that, just the God's people who had, provided for us whenever things got really hard, just out of nowhere, we'd have somebody that would do something like that.
The fun part about that story from our side of it, Eric and I had talked about, like, I remember going to him and saying, I think we need to offer this. I think this is what we need to do. And he was like, yeah, absolutely. But we had that conversation a day or two at least before ever calling you. So it's neat to see how God was already prepping for all of that. And then at just the right time, pulled it together and said, I'm here.
Yeah, there's been a lot of that. And I think that, like, while it's continued on and it hasn't stopped, I was saying the other day, sometimes it gets some points where she amps up, and like, I'll just, in the middle of the night, she'll just like, the other night she was like breathing almost like it was like a Lamaze breathing or something in the middle of the night. It was like, and I was like, what is going on? And then I could just, like, it just hit me, like, because it's been a while since she's amped up that bad before. And it just hit me that that's what it was. And so oftentimes I kind of feel a little helpless to not be able to help her, because when it gets like that, the only way that you can shut it down is for her to fall asleep. And so I'll just like pat her on the leg, like almost like a repetitive pat, like you would pat a baby, and just be praying, God, let her go to sleep. And so I'll just pray that over and over again. And the last time, a couple weeks ago when that happened, it was like probably 2-3 minutes later, she was going from like Lamaze breathing, like this really heavy breathing, to just, I started to hear her like snore lightly, and I was like, oh, thanks. And I think that's actually when I thought, this is like the name of God that we focus on is God is there, because it was, again, just an instantaneous answer to that prayer, just to let us know that he's there and he's present.
Yeah. Both of you have been really honest, just as an observer and as a friend, and hearing you share bits of your life and your story over the years. Something that I keep coming back to with you guys is, how do you do it? And it's such a pain. And it's crazy to me how much a headache can just deplete you physically of your energy and everything. And I'm a whiner when that happens. I'm not gonna try to pretend I'm not. It's like bad. I whine. But then I also think about Annette. And Annette, to this day, I don't know that I've ever actually heard you have a whine fest, and which kind of makes me feel lonely sometimes. But
It happens. Trust me.
I know I applaud your faith through this. You've been steadfast. Both of you have been steadfast. And it's not to say you don't have those moments where it's hard and you're angry or you're struggling, but just like your trust and your purpose in this, like God has a purpose and he's still good, astounds me.
I think for me, in the very beginning, I did this hospitalization. I had been to so many doctors. It's like somewhere between like 45 and 50 at this point. I've tried so many medicines, like I don't even remember what they are anymore. Somewhere early on, it's probably 2014, we did this hospitalization therapy thing. And it's like the closest thing to chemotherapy I've ever really witnessed. I mean, it was just some kind of awful. Like I'm already miserable and I'm in this hospital for 3 days and they've got me like all IV'd up and they're just like pouring these drugs into my system, just trying to get this headache to break. And every time they give me medicine, I feel worse than the time before. And there was this one particular medicine, can't remember what it's called, but every time they give it to me, I would like feel my heart racing and like I couldn't breathe. And then I'd start like twitching and my head would jerk and then my body would flush like from head to toe red. And I remember just thinking to myself, I can't do this anymore. Like, I can't do this. And I remember praying, God, if you cannot take this headache, then you're going to have to take me. Like, I cannot do this. And then about 3 seconds later, I sat up in bed and vomited. So that was fun. And I was like, okay, we are not on the same page. Like, I said, take the headache or take this. But like, I literally sat up and yeah, it was awful. And then I laid back in bed and it was like this voice, not audible, but a thought that wasn't my own came across. And it was from in Job, where God says, where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? And I just remember thinking, okay, like, I have no idea where this is going. I have no idea why this is happening, but it's just not about me. And that's really kind of what I've clung to, I guess, is because it's hard to sort of give up the idea of yourself. Like I don't like this. I don't want it in my life. I don't like how it's changed my life. But remembering that it's just not about me. And that it will be over one day. There's this massive hope in knowing that it will be over.
Yeah.
It may not be. I remember Jake asked me that once, I guess. He said, Mom, do you think your headache is ever going to go away? And this has been several years. And we were sitting on the couch, kind of sat there for a minute. And I remember answering, yes, one day this is all going to be gone, but it may not be on this side of heaven. And I think there's hope in that, and knowing that this isn't the end. This isn't all there is. It's not what I want, what I would have chosen out of this life for myself, but there's so much more to it than what I can see. And this is what God's chosen for us. And so we just get up each day and do the best that we can do.
And I would agree with you that I'm more of the whiner, and then more specifically, I just sort of get angry and want to like break stuff sometimes. But like most certainly, God has given her like a strength that I've never seen. Sometimes I feel very like, I mean, I guess I'm kind of in awe of her ability to be the one with the headache all the time and the one with the least amount of complaints. But she really honestly hasn't that much. There have been a couple of times when I can recall that she would just kind of have a moment of weakness where she's just like, she's just crying and she doesn't, she just wants it to go away. But not many, not many at all. There have been plenty of times whenever I've wanted to break stuff, and there still are. But I could, I think God has given her just an amazing amount of strength to be able to endure that. And it also seems like whenever she's having a down day, I'm usually up,
Mm.
and vice versa. If I'm having a rough day where I don't want to have to deal with it, she's more upbeat and positive.
Mhm. You touched on something earlier, and I want to jump back here real quick before we wrap up because we're talking about how God is there, and both of you have experienced isolation through this process in different ways. Annette, you in particular, I remember we had Jake one day, and I was supposed to drop him off, and I wanted to check on you, and I went in the room, and it was so dark, and I honestly kind of panicked. I was like, "Is she dead?" You were so still. It freaked me out. I was like, "Oh my goodness!" And then I could hear you breathe, and I was. But you did. You spent a lot of time in a dark room, and I'm so thankful. Like we're to a point now where we're looking forward to a camping trip this summer and getting to spend time together. But that wasn't always there. So Annette, I'm going to ask you first. Well, or Kenny, you guys can take time. But as you've experienced various forms of isolation, whether that be from each other or from friends and even family events, what has God's presence meant to you through this?
It's really just brought a form of peace, like I said, and hope. Because there was, even now I feel isolated. I still am not able to make phone calls. I'm still not able to, just my dad turned 70 last week, and he was meeting a couple of the girls or my sisters for lunch, and he had taken this big walk, and I couldn't figure out like how to get there. Like I didn't have a ride to get up there and meet him for lunch, and so I didn't go. Um, and it's just there are times when it's still just very, I guess, very lonely. Um, but knowing he's here and knowing he's watching over us kind of helps bring a peace in the middle of all that, I guess.
I feel personally that I guess I probably lived a pretty charmed life, I guess, up until this, and so like there was like a whole lot of things that went wrong. So um, I feel like maybe I was just kind of I don't know if weak is the right word, but like I feel like going through this, and especially going through this as it's a drawn out process. Like every once in a while, when God kind of like flashes some sort of um, evidence that He's there,
Mm.
I think that has. I don't. I feel like we could just. I go back to the thing with Jake and walking in the dark park. I just kind of feel like you could, if you go through this and he's with you through all this stuff, then you could do just about anything. And so I think there's a level of confidence in him being there that brings a lot of comfort to me. So nowadays, whenever she has those, I mean, when she used to amp up like that in the middle of the night, I lost a lot of weight from stress just when we first went through it. Like, and I didn't really look all that healthy, um, but I mean, just like she would amp up. We'd go to the ER and get these shots or something that would make the migraine go down just a little bit, and she would act just a touch high, and then she'd throw them up on the way home, and then we'd be right back to square one. But it was so incredibly stressful. I worried about every little thing. There were times I didn't know we didn't know what we were dealing with, so I didn't know if she was gonna make it. But I feel like there's been a lot of like since we've gone through this extended period with God with us. I feel like there's confidence now that like I don't think I get as unnerved by all this. I just kind of feel like he's going to help us get through it because he's proven it over and over again by meeting those needs, and most of the time just out of nowhere. I just kind of, I guess I felt like I was able to just trust him more. So.
Mm-hmm. I was talking to a friend recently about how thick-headed I can be because over the last year, God keeps bringing up the story of the woman at the well. And I was like, I don't get it. What in the world does that have to do with anything? And then I realized this is like, he is our constant source. We have to have him to survive. And I love how both of you are just sharing that we can have confidence, not because the current situation is so great, but because we know who he is and what he's done, and he never changes. So even though everything else might change, and it's not always changing for the better, sometimes, like you said, it just sucks. He's still good, and he's still there. I'm really just so thankful to both of you for sharing your story today. I know it's not easy, and especially thank you just for taking the time and the physical energy that you're giving to do this. The crazy thing about creating in this way and spitting content out is I have no idea where it goes. I have no idea who's going to see it or hear it. The cool thing is somebody listening to this right now is exactly what they needed to hear. So thank you for being willing to let God speak through you.
Kind of always talked about how I think somebody in our Sunday school class always said it was your assignment. And it's really, at first it was really tough to deal, to think that this might be your assignment. But like, if you're going to go through all this stuff, this struggle and things, if you're not using it to like put it out there to glorify God and to encourage other people, then it's kind of a waste. So we're always willing to talk about it.
Yeah. And that's the perfect segue into how I want to wrap up, just this reminder that we all have a story, and we're meant to share it, because when we share our stories, it reveals the author and how awesome he is. And we can use that to encourage one another and just point us back to Christ. I'm like a squirrel sometimes, get really distracted, but when the focus was where it needs to be, life is a lot easier. So thank you both for giving of your time. If you guys would like to touch base, if you want to learn more about Kenny and Annette's story, you can contact me at ashleyivester.com. I'll see you next time. Bye. Thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast. I really hope that you enjoyed our chat. And if you did, I would be honored if you would take just a moment to subscribe and share. You can also catch up with me during the week at ashleyivester.com. I can't wait for our next talk, but until then, go and grow in grace.